Hello, sample collectors. Greetings from the United States. This video is designed to walk you through the standard operating procedure for sampling fecal sludge from pit latrines. So I'm going to walk you through the standard operating procedure, including the list of materials that I really want to make sure that you have. And from there, I will walk through the actual sampling process using some somewhat funny placeholders, since I don't actually have a pit latrine here, and it's very cold outside as well, so it would be pretty unpleasant to be out there actually sampling at the moment. So hopefully this video will help answer some of your questions, and it'll give us an opportunity to talk about specifically some of the materials you'll be using, as well as the processes, so that there's not any miscommunication about how to actually sample from pits. So to start out, I want to walk through the actual materials you'll be using. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you have a list of your standard operating procedures printed out with you. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of walk through those. First off, your sludge nabber, which for me is just a pole, but it's pretty much just a pole for you, about a 6-foot long pole. A sample container. I've got a small one here, but you want your sample container to be about 100 milliliters, and the ones that we've already talked about look pretty good to me, so that should be fine, with a twist-off cap. And ideally, they would be sterile. So that's your sample container. Plenty of gloves. Okay. So this is a really critical one. So this is a plastic cover for the sludge nabber. So I'm going to get a little closer to the camera here and show you what this actually is. So this is just a long plastic tube, okay? And it has open ends on both ends, okay? And I'll show you what that's for in just a second, okay? Obviously, paper towels, plenty of trash bags. We've got our bleach solution and our ethanol solution. Obviously, I don't actually have those, but that's what we should have here. Plenty of zip ties that we'll be using. And you can see what I have here. This is very similar. You can kind of get a standard zip tie, nothing fancy there. It just needs to be big enough to go around the sample container and the sludge nabber, so it can attach them. That's the main point there. Some rubber bands. So, standard size rubber bands, nothing fancy there. And then a cooler, which I have right here, which has ice in it for transportation from the site to the lab back in town. Lastly, hand soap and water. Ideally, the households would have this. I mean, you can just use their hand washing station, but if not, it would be nice for you to have soap, and then you'd be able to use some water nearby, ideally clean water, and if not, some hand sanitizer, just to keep everybody safe. That's obviously a lot of what goes into these protocols is making sure that you're safe. We want the study to be successful, but first and foremost, we want you to be safe. So let's definitely learn these protocols really well, and I think we'll be able to achieve that. So before leaving for the day to go out and sample fecal sludge from pits, there are a couple things that need to be done ahead of time, in addition to making sure you have all these materials. You want to make sure that you're going to cut these disposable plastic tubings into lengths that are equal to the longest length of the sludge nabber. So the idea here is that these plastic tubes are going to keep the sludge nabber from getting direct exposure to the fecal sludge. Okay, so kind of think of it like a glove for the sludge nabber. So what you're going to end up doing is actually putting the sludge nabber like that, okay? And then this will get secured with a zip tie and a rubber band. And then the sample container will be attached to the outside of that with a zip tie. So when this actually gets inserted into the fecal sludge, the bag gets dirty, but the sludge nabber does not get direct exposure. Now, obviously, this isn't foolproof. That's why you'll also be cleaning the sludge nabber after sampling. But this is kind of the glove for the sludge nabber to make sure that doesn't get direct exposure for that. Okay, so cutting those plastic tubes is really important. You also want to make sure that you have enough bleach and ethanol solutions. I will leave that to you guys. I don't know the size of your sample containers and all the dilution, dilution measures that you'll have to do. So I'll leave that to you. But you want 10% bleach solution and 70% ethanol solution. Okay, and then making sure you have all the supplies that we already listed. Okay, so that's before you head out to sample in the field. At this point in the sampling process, you've now reached the household and you have gone through the eligibility criteria for this specific pit to actually ensure that it's good, that it qualifies for the study. So as the standard operating procedure says, before removing the covered pit, go and put on gloves. Okay. And the types of glove you use is kind of at your disposal. I just kind of have some gloves that are typically used for food catering. This, just the idea is just to keep you protected. So nitrile gloves, latex gloves, kind of your choice there. And then you want to grab a pre-measured length of the plastic covering, that plastic tubing, and slide it over the sludge hammer, starting at the bottom. Okay. Then you want to gather the end of the plastic that's under the bottom of the sludge hammer and tie it tightly with a zip tie that's going to waterproof the end of that plastic tubing. And then you want to put a rubber band at the top of that plastic tubing. And then we'll attach our sample container and undo the lid, and then we're ready to actually take a sample. So we've got our sludge nabber. We've got our plastic tubing, which we slide over the end, not all the way. And we take a zip tie. Tying it nice and tight so that waterproofs the bottom end there. And then on the top, and gather a rubber band like that. You have to kind of use your best judgment as the best way to do this. You end up with something that looks like that. Again, kind of a glove for your sludge nabber, okay? Then we take our sample container with the lid still on because we're trying to keep it sterile on the inside. And I'm holding it up so you can see a little better, but you might want to lay this down or, kind of use your best judgment there. And then taking another zip tie. And again, your sludge hammer's got a little kind of a shelf to put that sample container on, so it'll be a little bit easier for you. And you want to make sure to get this, not really, really tight, but tight enough that it's not going to fall off in the pit. There we go. Okay, so you can see mine moves a tiny, tiny, tiny bit when I'm really pulling on it, but that's the idea. Okay, so we end up with this kind of setup, and then we can remove the lid, and now we're actually ready to sample. Okay, and we can just set that lid aside. Ideally, you would have some kind of clean area. I've got obviously a table here, but this is, you guys know how field work works. It could be a little complicated to keep things clean. So you'll have to use your best judgment and develop a practice that works well for you. Okay, so now that the sample container is open, we want to make sure that it stays clean. So the way we set it down, and ideally you wouldn't set it down, but if you need to set it down, that's just be mindful of that. Next step is just to remove the cover of the pit latrine. So I have a surrogate, a pit model right here. Okay, so this is now our pit latrine that's on the ground. And so we would remove the lid. Okay, so now we've exposed the fecal sludge and we're ready to sample. And there's one more thing we need to do. We want to take a trash bag. We want to open it up. And we want to basically lay it on the ground so that it's easy to get the sludge nabber into. So kind of just holding it open like that. Okay, so we basically kind of have an area that we can contaminate really easily and then cover it up. Okay. So now that we're actually ready to sample, we're going to take the sludge nabber by the handle, okay, and we're going to insert it into the pit along the pit center line, so right in the center of the pit, trying not to touch the edges of the pit. And we're going to submerge the sample container below the surface of the fecal sludge, but just below the surface, for about 5 seconds to make sure that the fecal sludge will actually enter the sample container. So I'm inserting it, okay, and I can see that it filled up. Okay. And then we also want to do this one more time just to make sure that it's filled. Okay, here we go. So now that we have our sample, and we've also contaminated the end of the sludge nabber here, we want to raise it out of the pit and put it directly into the center of the trash bag here so now we're again trying to contain our contaminated area here. We also then want to grab the tube cap, which is right here, and put it safely onto the sample container there. So now that our sample has been capped, it's now safe, but we need to start some of the decontamination protocols. So the next step is to spray the contaminated area down with bleach solution. You want to do that with your clean hand. So my right hand is the dirty hand that just put the cap on. So I'm going to lay that down, making sure to keep the contaminated area within the trash bag. Take my clean hand and spray down the area. And it might be a good idea to kind of turn the device and then spray it down again to make sure that that whole area is covered with the bleach solution. And then we want to take off our gloves. I'm using sterile technique. So typically you would grab one glove and then grab another glove like that. So now you have all of the non-exposed area of the glove that you can grab there. And then we put it in with the contamination there. Now we want to wrap the trash bag up. Okay. And obviously you want to tie it there. I'm just gonna leave it there for the moment because I want to get it back out in just a second to show you. And then we want to leave the sludge nabber and all of the internal components there in contact with the bleach solution for about 15 minutes to make sure that the bleach is going to kill anything that's pathogenic, again, on the outside of the sample container. Then at this point, during that 15 minutes, we can go ahead and replace the lid on our pit. Okay. I'm just going to get this out of here because we're not going to need the pit anymore. Now, after 15 minutes, again, consulting our SOP, while wearing clean gloves, we're going to unwrap the trash bag and then using our left hand, undo the rubber band from the sludge nabber and throw it back into the trash bag. And then again, using your left hand, we're going to pick up the tube by its top and wipe it off with a paper towel using your right hand. So again, the right hand is the contaminated and the left hand is the non-contaminated. Again, you're welcome to switch it up. Just be consistent so that that muscle memory comes in. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes. I'm going to put on another pair of gloves here. Okay, so we can undo our trash bag after that 15 minutes. Okay. So to get the rubber band actually off the plastic tubing in the sludge nabber, it's a good idea to hold the plastic tubing with your right hand and then pull the rubber band up like this to get the rubber band off. Okay, so now the top of the plastic tubing is exposed. And to get the sample container off, again, probably use your best judgment here. Ideally, we're trying to keep our right hand dirty, but this is the spot where it gets a little bit messy here. So we need to actually just kind of, I'm going to try to slide the sample container up. So now that the sample container is no longer connected to the sludge nabber, we want to pick it up by its top with our left hand, grab a paper towel with our right, and do our best to get off the majority of the contamination. The paper towel goes back into the contaminated area. And then we're going to take our ethanol solution, spray the container down, then take another paper towel. You can see here where you might want to have two people, and that's ideal. Wipe down the ethanol solution off of the container. Paper towel goes back into the trash bag. And then this guy is now ready to go into the cooler, which is right here. And you'll note that we have not labeled this sample yet. That comes after we've dealt with all of this over here. So there's a bit of a planning strategy there. Okay, so now that we've got our tube back in there, we're going to take the sludge nabber in our right hand by the plastic tubing, okay, which might be a little counterintuitive. Okay, so we're grabbing by the plastic tubing here. Pull the plastic tubing off the bottom of the sampler using the left hand and place it in the trash bag. Okay. So plastic tubing goes in there. So you'll see here that the sludge nabber might have some residual contamination on it, but it should be pretty minimal. Most of it should be on the plastic tubing that we just took off. Okay? And then we want to set this sludge nabber aside so that we can clean it in the next step. Then at this stage, we're going to take our gloves off because the majority of the contamination is now in the trash bag. And I just want to show you a sterile technique to remove your gloves. You want to grab more or less right there and pull off. Okay. So this hand is now completely free and has not touched anything. You'll see that I've crumpled this glove up into here. And then to get this one off, you put your thumb under there and pull off. Now we have two clean hands and the relatively clean side of the glove that we're able to touch here. That goes back in the trash bag. Okay, so now all the contamination is there. We can go ahead and tie up our trash bag. That's ready for the garbage. Then we would put on another set of gloves, put the label onto the fecal sludge sample container for this pit. Then we would thoroughly wash our hands and store these samples on ice and transport them to the lab by the end of the day, as we discussed. So I'm not a complete expert in this process. You can see that I was having to figure it out as I went along. And so I think you're going to have to do the same. You're going to have to find out what works for you and communicate that back to me because that's going to be important for describing how the study was performed, but also just learning for all of our purposes. At the end of each sample day, as the SOP describes, wearing gloves, you want to spray down the entire sludge nabber with bleach and leave it for 15 minutes. That can be placed in a trash bag and transported as needed. If you need to do that, you need to travel right when you do that, right at the end of the day. After 15 minutes, wipe down the sludge nabber using a paper towel, spray the sludge nabber with ethanol and wipe it down again. At the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of these trash bags, unfortunately. So goes life. We need to keep you safe, so that's why we do it. We want to consolidate all of those trash bags into a single trash bag and then take them to a proper place for disposal. We want to make sure that all of the labels on these sample containers were done correctly. So what I would suggest there, again, use your best judgment. What I would suggest is when you've completed a pit sample and labeled the sample container correctly, you will be able to mark that off on your daily sampling checklist. And then obviously bring the all the samples to the lab by the end of the day. And then lastly, thoroughly wash your hands. Whenever you have the opportunity, particularly after a pit sampling process, go ahead and wash your hands, of course. So I hope overall that was relatively clear. If you have questions, comments, concerns, do let me know. The one thing that might be a little bit difficult to find are those plastic tubes to go over the sludge nabber. Shipping companies tend to have things like that. You've seen those, shipping air-filled bladders. But plastic tubing shouldn't be too hard to find. And if not, you can of course use trash bags, ideally smaller trash bags that you would have to wrap around the sludge nabber so much. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.